Alright, today we're going to be talking about 11-6, which is percents less than 1%. Yesterday, or with the previous lesson, we talked about percents greater than 1%, which that means they're greater than the whole. And when it's less than 1%, it's still just a part of the whole. It's just a very, very, very small part, usually. So we still use the same rules. We can just move our decimal 2 places over, depending on if we're going from a percent to a decimal or a decimal to a percent. So we want to think, well, if we're going from a percent to a decimal, what do we do? And so for this one, it looks a little bit confusing because there's already a decimal there. So let's do a quick review. If I had 40%, where is my decimal whenever I have 40%? It's a whole number, so it's always at the end. And when I want to change that to a decimal, remember, I moved my decimal to the left twice. And so this is equivalent to 0.40, because once I move it twice, it's right there in front of the 4. So we still move decimal to the left twice. So we're going to do that here as well. It looks weird because we already have a decimal in it, so many people, when they see a decimal, they're like, oh no, we move it to the right. That's not true. When we're changing a decimal to a percent, yes, we move it to the right, but this is a decimal within a percent, so it's technically a percent. So we still move it to the left twice. So on this one, my decimal's here, so we do the same thing. We move once, twice. And remember, quite a few chapters ago, whenever we were moving our decimal, that if we have an empty space, we want to put a 0 there. And then our new decimal goes there. So 4,000th of a percent as a decimal would be 0.12340 zeros, and then our 4. So 4,000th of a percent is the same thing as there's our tenths, hundredths, thousandths, 10,000, 100,000. Is the same thing as 400,000th. So that would be our answer here. This one was supposed to be a percent. I forgot to put my sign there. And so same thing. We just simply move our decimal to the left twice. Because this is the same thing. We can do the same thing that we did with our percents greater than 100%. I could technically take this 0.004 and put it over 100, because remember, percents are out of 100. It's a ratio always out of 100. But we can't have a decimal in our fraction. So however many numbers are in our decimal, so 1, 2, 3, or it's in the thousandths place. So we're going to times this by 1,000 to get rid of our decimal. We would do the same thing on the bottom. If I multiply 4 thousandths by 1,000, that would give me 4. And then 100 times 1,000 gives us 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 zeros. So it's 4 over 10,000. So again, this is 4 10,000ths, and this is tenths, hundredths. I didn't put enough zeros there. Sorry. I only put 4. Now there's 5. So that's 4 100,000ths. I thought that looked weird. So there's our tenths, hundredths, thousandths, 10,000ths, 100,000. So it's the same thing. That's why you can set it up like this as a fraction, or you can simply move your decimal to the left twice, whatever you choose. We would do the same thing here. We could put it over 100. Whatever our last digit is in, what place value, it's in the thousandths. So we're going to multiply it by 1,000 to get rid of that. Do the same thing on the bottom. That gives me 68 over 100,000. Which is the same thing as my 8 needs to go in my 100,000ths place. So that means 6 would go in our 10,000ths. Then we have thousandths, hundredths, tenths, our decimal, and a 0. Sorry, kind of ran out of room there. Or again, move your decimal to the left twice. 1, 2. Would give us a 0 there. So that would be 0, 0, 0, 6, 8. So tenths, hundredths, thousandths, 10,000s, 100,000s. You could do it either way. Alright, go ahead and pause this and do C alone. You can do it whichever way you prefer. Alright, when you do that, you should have gotten 5/10 millionth as a decimal. So if you moved it over twice, that's fine, or you put it over 100, and then you would have multiplied both top and bottom by 100,000. But you should have 6 zeros between your decimal and the 5. So 0.00000005. Alright, the next part is writing a fractional percent as a decimal. So there are two steps that I wrote out here for us. First thing we want to do is we want to change the fractional percent to a decimal percent. So right now it's a fractional percent because it is a percent. I've got my sign right there, and it's written as a fraction. Whereas up here, our percents were written as decimals. So we want to change this so it's a decimal percent, not a fraction. So first thing we have to do is we have to change that fraction to a decimal. So to do that, we divide. Remember, numerator always goes inside the division box. A denominator goes on the outside. And we're changing it to a decimal. So we are going to keep adding zeros until we either have a repeating decimal or a terminating decimal. So I went ahead and added some zeros there. Remember, bring your decimal up. 2,000 does not go into 3, does not go into 30, it does not go into 300. But 2,000 does go into 3,000. It goes into it one time. 1 times 2,000 is 2,000. Subtract. We have 1,000. Add another 0. Bring it down. 2,000 goes into 10,000 5 times. And that would be 10,000. So we're left with 0. So this as a decimal, remember, all we did was change our fractional percent to a decimal percent. So we still want to put our percent sign on this number. That is 15,000th, or sorry, 15/10,000th of a percent. And then we want to change it to a regular decimal. So to do that, we do what we did up top. We either put it over 100 or we simply just move our decimal to the left twice. So I'm going to do that down here because I don't have a whole lot of room up there. Move it over twice, means decimal goes there. We're going to add a 0 there. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then our 1, 5. So there's our tens, hundreds, thousands, 10,000, 100,000, and our millionth. So it's 15 millionth of a, sorry, it's just 15 millionth. There's no percent there. That would be our final answer. Do not stop here. That is still a percent. We're changing it to a decimal. We're not changing it from a fractional percent to a decimal percent. We're changing it from a fractional percent to a decimal. So once you change it here, you do your division, that's still a percent. We still have to move our decimal to change it to a decimal. Alright, let's go ahead and do B together. Same thing, numerator is our dividend and denominator is our divisor. So that means 15 would go inside and 24 would go on the outside. 24 does not go into 15. I'm going to have a decimal and a 0. 24 does go into 150. Let me focus that a little bit. Try to. 24 does go into 150. It goes into 150 6 times. 6 times 24 is 144. We subtract that, we get 6. Add a 0, bring it down. 24 goes into 60 how many times? And if you're not sure, you can always estimate. You can say, well, 20 goes into 63 times. But since 24 is bigger than 20, it won't go into it 3 times. It will be too much. So then we know it definitely goes into it twice then. 2 times 24 is 48. If we added another 24 to that, 8 plus 4 is 12. Carry the 1. And you would end up with 72. So that would be too big. So it would just be twice. which will give us 48. Subtract 12, keep adding a 0. Remember, we keep doing that until we either have a terminating decimal or a repeating decimal. 24 goes into 120 how many times? Well, think. 24 times 10 is 240. Half of 240 is 120, so that means half of 10 would be what it is, so it would be 5. We could always test that out. 24 times 5, 4 times 5 is 20. 2 times 5 is 10 plus 2, 120. So that leaves us with 0. Again, this is not our decimal. That is our percent. We just changed our fractional percent to a decimal percent. Now we need to change it to a decimal by moving our decimal over twice. In the empty space, we always add a 0. So our answer would be 0.00625. Do not forget to move that decimal. This is not your final answer. Again, that is your percent. We want to change the percent to a decimal. So do not forget to move it over. Go ahead, pause this, and do C alone. Alright, you would divide 12 divided by 25, and you should get 48 hundredths, so it's 48 hundredths of a percent. And then to change it to a decimal, we move our decimal over to the left twice. So once we're on that 0, and then one more time, and we have a blank spot, so we add another 0, so our final answer would be 0.0048, or 48 10,000ths. Alright, go ahead and flip your paper over. Alright, on the back side, on this one we are expressing our percent as an equivalent fraction in simplest form. Make sure you are reading the directions clearly. This says we're writing these as equivalent fractions, not a fractional percent as an equivalent fraction. So you have to make sure you are really, really paying attention to that vocabulary in these lessons, because I don't want you to leave them as a percent when they really should just be a fraction or a decimal. Like on the other side, we change it to a decimal percent, and then we still have to change it to a decimal. On this one, they are written as a decimal percent or a fractional percent, either way, and we're changing it to a regular fraction. So don't take this and just say, oh, that's 9/10 of a percent, so I'm going to put 9 over 10 and put my percent sign there and I'm done. That is not what we are doing. And that is not 9/10, just a plain 9/10 as a fraction, because 9/10 is actually 90%. So make sure you are paying attention to the vocabulary and really thinking about what you need to do. So again, we have 2 steps. We are going to change these to a decimal, not a decimal percent. We are changing it to a decimal. So we're doing the exact same thing we did on the other side. We're going to change this decimal percent to a decimal, and then we're going to convert that decimal to a fraction. So this is already a decimal percent. So how do I change a percent to a regular decimal? I move my decimal to the left twice. So that's all I have to do here. Is I move it twice. I have an extra space, so I'm going to add a 0. So this is 0.009. That is my decimal. I don't need a percent sign. And then I'm converting this to a fraction. So this is in my 10 hundredths thousandths place. So remember, whatever place the last digit is in, that is your denominator. So now I have 9 over 1,000. And then we can use our trick from last lesson, where we look and we see, is our numerator divisible by 2, 5, or 10? It is not even. It does not end in a 5 or a 0, so it is not divisible by 2, 5, or 10. So this is our fraction in simplest form. We are going to do C, follow the same steps. It's already, zoom in and try to focus a little bit. It is already a decimal percent, so all I have to do is move my decimal over then to change it to a regular decimal. So I move it twice to the left, add a 0 in my open space. So this is 0.0047. This is in our tenths, hundredths, thousandths, 10,000ths place. So we're going to put 47 over 10,000. And we check again, is 47 divisible by 2, 5, or 10? It's not even. It does not end in a 5 or a 0. So that is our final answer. Go ahead and pause this and do B alone. Again, it's already as a decimal percent, so I don't have to change it from a fractional percent to a decimal percent and then a decimal. I just simply have to move my decimal over. Make sure you're putting it in simplest form. That's what it told us up at the top. So check to see if it's divisible by 2, 5, or 10. If it is, then you can simplify it. You don't have to divide it by one of those 3 numbers. You can, if there's something bigger that you know goes into both, you can do that. But that's just a place to kind of get started and see if you could simplify it. So go ahead and pause this and do that one on your own. Alright, should have moved it over twice and got 55 10,000ths. And then 55 does end in a 5, so that means it's divisible by 5. So I divided top and bottom by 5, and that gave me 11 over 2,000. So that is our final answer. We cannot simplify that more. And if we wanted to, we could plug that into a calculator and make sure we did it correctly. I'm going to use my cell phone because it's what's closest to me. So remember, a fraction is the same thing as a division problem. It's 11 divided by 2,000. So if I typed into my calculator 11 divided by 2,000, that gives us our decimal. So we did that correctly. If I change it to a percent, oh wait, did it the wrong way. 0.55%, and check it. You can do it that way. If you wanted to double check your work after you were done. You don't have to do that, but you can. Oops. Clear that out. Alright, the last 2, I don't know why I put A and B there. They should really be D and E. I was pregnant when I wrote these, so probably had pregnancy brain, and you guys know how that goes. So, these are not already written as a decimal percent. They are written as fractional percents. So we have an extra step in there. First thing we have to do is change these to a decimal percent, and then change it to a decimal, and then write it as a regular fraction. We are not, this is a fractional percent, not a fraction, so we don't just leave it like this. So first thing we want to do, change that to a decimal percent. So I'm going to have 3 divided by 4. 4 does not go into 3, but it does go into 37 times. That gives us 28. Subtract, we get 20. It goes in there 5 times. So this is 0.75%. Now we still need to change that to a regular decimal. It's still a percent. So we move our decimal over to the left twice. So 0.0075 or 75 10,000th. So then I'm going to put that over 10,000, and then we do what we've been doing. We put in simplest form, so see if it ends in a 2, 5, or 10. Or I'm sorry, if it's divisible by 2, 5, or 10. It's not even, it does not end in a 0, so it does not work with 2 and 10, but it does end in a 5, so it is divisible by 5. But like I tell you guys in class, sometimes if you're dealing with a percent and then you have a 25, a 50, or a 75 up top, think about money. Think about quarters and a dollar. So 25 cents will go into 75 cents. That means I could divide this by 25. 75 divided by 25, how many quarters do you have if you have 75 cents? You have 3. And then 10,000. If I was thinking of this as 75 cents, that means I have a decimal right here after 2 places. So I'm going to move 2 places over, so I have $100. How many times will 25 cents go into $100? Or, yeah, that would make it a little bit easier. We'll stick with what I'm saying. No. Let's say how many times will $25 go into $10,000? That would be a little easier. So if $25 goes into $100 4 times, then it goes into $10,000 40 times. Again, if you wanted to, we could double check our work. 10,000 divided by 25. Oops. See? I messed up. That's why you always want to double check. I messed up because I did it into $1,000. I only added 1 0 on there. I should have added 2. Because if $25 goes into $100 4 times, 10 times $100 would be $1,000. So there would be our 40. So then 10,000 we'd be multiplying by another 10 and get our 400. Again, you can always double check using your calculator. We cannot simplify that more. 3, nothing goes into 3 besides 3, and if I divide 400 by 3, I get a decimal. So that is our final percent, or sorry, our final decimal. If we wanted to, we could plug that into a calculator and check. Sorry, you can't see that. And that is our decimal that we had to start off with. Alright, I want you to go ahead and pause this and do B alone. Alright, your final answer should have been 3 over 1,600. So you would divide 3 divided by 16 and get 0.1875%. Change that to a decimal, so you have 0.001875. This 5 is in the millionth place, so it's 1,875 over 1 million. It ended in a 75, so I went ahead and I started dividing by 25 on top and bottom. That gave me 75 over 40,000. I had a 75 up there again, so I tried 25 again. Since I had double zero at the end, well, I had more than a double zero. And when I divided by 25 again, I got 3 over 16,000, and that is our final answer. Again, if you wanted to, you could check and do 3 divided by, sorry, not 16,000, 1,600. And that is our decimal, so that is correct. Alright, this last one says, the U.S. House of Representatives has 435 members. 1 person represents Alaska, and 2 people represent Hawaii. To the nearest 100th%, what percent of the total delegates represent either Alaska or Hawaii? So that means we're going to count both. So if 1 person represents Alaska and 2 people represent Hawaii as a total, how many represent either one of them? And so that'd be 3 people. And it's out of 435 members. So our whole is 435, and the part we are talking about is only 3 people. So that is our fraction, and we want to change that to a percent to see what percent of the U.S. House of Representatives either represent Alaska or Hawaii. So this is just like we were doing. We haven't done that today. In previous lessons where we're changing a fraction to a percent. To change a fraction to a percent, remember we want to change it to a decimal. So to change a fraction to a decimal, we divide our numerator by our denominator. So we have 3 divided by 435. 435 does not go into 3. So we're going to add some zeros. 435 does not go into 3. It does not go into 30. It does not go into 300. It does go into 3,000. So what we can do is we can estimate 435. We can say that's estimate that to about 400. So 400 times 7 would be 2,800, and 400 times 8 would be 3,200. So we want to start about there. I like to start lower. So I'm going to do 435 times 7. 5 times 7, 35. So that gave us 3,045. So that is too big. So now we know we need to go smaller. So we're going to multiply it by 6. And that gives us 2,610. Now we know where to start, and we can start dividing and subtracting. 0 minus 0, 0, 10 minus 1 is 9, 9 minus 6 is 3, 2 minus 2 is nothing. So that leaves us 390. Bring down our next 0, 3,900. Well, we know it's got to be bigger than 7. If we add 435 to that, we would have about 3,400, so we know 8 definitely works. But we want to see, well, maybe 9 could work. I'm going to times that by 9. Actually, let's start it by 8. 5 times 8 is 40. 3 times 8, 24, 28. 4 times 8 is 32. So that gives us 3,480. If I added another 435 to that, it'd be just a little bit too big. So it would be 8. And it's 3,480. So that leaves us 420. Oops. So we're going to bring down a 0, and we are going to keep going. So we're rounding this to the nearest hundredth of a percent. So remember, whenever we change a decimal to a percent, we move our decimal to the right twice. So if I move my decimal right now to the right twice, that would give me 68 hundredth of a percent. But since we're rounding it to the nearest hundredth, we need to go one more space to see if we would round up or if we would round down. So we're going to go ahead and do this one more time. 435 goes into 4,200 9 times. I know that because 435 times 10 would be 4,350. That's smaller than that. And then we know it times 9 is 3,913. So it will be 9. And we could subtract, but we don't have to because we could stop here. So if I change this to a percent, I'm going to move my decimal to the right twice. So it's going to be 0.689%. But round it to the nearest hundredth of a percent. Right now this is thousandth. So I look at my hundredths place, which is my 8. I look right behind it. There's a 9 there. So would I round up, or would I round up to 69 hundredth of a percent, or would I round down to 68 hundredth of a percent? Well, since 9 is bigger than 5, we would round up. So this would be 69 hundredth of a percent. Alright, that is the end of 11/6% less than 1%.